everybody. This is Dana Brigman of the Canine Coach Carolinas, and Dr. Barb Fox is with me again today. Very excited and keep trying to have her do more and more of these. I will let her introduce herself in just a moment. And Dr. Barb, I want you to tell us today again about your current movement that you're initiating or founding and how we can actually take action or get involved and support you in those efforts and what we might learn by being a participant. So take it away, and then we'll come back to my favorite topic on vaccines.
Thanks, Dana. These are always great, fun sessions that we have together and very informative, I hope, for your listeners. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm Dr. Barb Fox. I graduated from Iowa State University's College of Veterinary Medicine in 1994. So I've been around the block for a little bit. Last 14 years have been devoted pretty much to holistic medicine after I had a health scare in 2007 that could have been fatal. And I turned to holistic medicine instead of going through conventional treatment. So this natural health or animal health movement that I have started is not really anything except I want to make sure that every animal person out there, whether you have cats, cattle, horses, dogs, guinea pigs, whatever, that you step outside the box of conventional medication or conventional medical treatments and look at natural therapies for our animals, because it's just like with us. Pharmaceuticals have side effects, vaccines have side effects, even bad food can create so much havoc in the body. And so we have to look out for our animals since they can't verbalize to us. I mean, I know a lot of animal communicators, can figure out what's going on with an animal, but if they, for the average person that doesn't understand what their animal's feeling or could be feeling or not feeling, then I think it's really important to do as close to therapies and care as to what nature would have intended them to have.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, for example, if you're feeding your cat a food that has cranberries and peas and barley in it, is that really what that cat is intended to eat? A cat is intended to eat meat and prey.
Right.
And so, they're strict carnivores. So these are the types of things that I want people to be aware of. Perfect example. Yesterday, I was filling in for another veterinary clinic, and this guy came in with a little Bichon, and anybody who knows Bichons know that they're allergic a lot. Yeah. Well, the guy was feeding it, the owner was feeding it, a really nice client, but he was feeding it some kind of, he thought a good quality dry kibble. And I had this talk to him. I said, well, if you're against doing a homemade food, he didn't think the animal should have or dog should have meat.
Yeah, and I hear people say all the time, well, they shouldn't have people food. I'm like,
right.
The people part, it's food. They need good food.
And so I kind of equated the commercial dry food to cereal. And I said, do you want to feed cereal to your dog all the time? And he had that blank look on his face like, oh, I didn't think about that. Mm-hmm. So I hope that I got through to him that he could offer some fresh meat and some fresh vegetables to his dog in lieu of all of that stuff. And maybe the allergy situation would be better.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But this is what I want to do.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm on a mission to educate as many people as possible. So if you follow me on my webpage, which is barbfoxdvm.com, you'll get some blog articles, you'll get some information there. There's some courses that you can subscribe to. Also, follow me on Facebook on the Natural Animal Health Movement. And I got a lot of irons in the fire, but I try to put posts up frequently on different natural animal topics.
Terrific. That's exciting. I don't think I knew about your Facebook page yet, and I will go follow it as soon as we're done here. So,
all right.
So everybody go follow Dr. Barb, and she teaches a lot of great information, and I'm happy that she takes time to share here with us as we do a lot of these podcasts. So today we're going to be moving into a hot topic about vaccines, and vaccines are controversial whether they're for pets or people, right? And so, Dr. Barb, why do you think this topic is controversial? Why is it not something that is very clear and well understood and things that we can just truly trust, about whether we need them or not?
Oh, loaded question, Dana.
I ask you those all the time.
Right? You do. But vaccinating, the purpose of vaccination is to prevent a disease. So if you vaccinate against rabies, hopefully your animal will not get rabies. If you vaccinate for distemper, or I should say against distemper, you'll hope your dog doesn't come down with distemper. That's the whole premise behind it. Here's the big but, though, is I'm not against vaccines. Please don't go there. I still vaccinate animals, but I'm, cautious about which vaccines I choose. Don't over vaccinate. Don't vaccinate too frequently. Don't vaccinate for the things that they're not exposed to, that kind of thing. But going back to the actual vaccine vial, when you pull up a vial, if a veterinarian would read all the vaccine components in there, you'd be shocked.
Mm-hmm.
They're, even in the human realm, and I know that the animal models follow very closely to the human models, there can be up to 22 different, what we call excipients in that vaccine. These are additives like thimerosal, which is a mercury derivative, formaldehyde, which is an embalming agent. There are other animal proteins in there. And this is why I believe a lot of our animals are allergic to different animal proteins, is because the cell culture that the vaccine is grown on different animal medium. And I'm not going to get into the specifics. You can Google that. It's very complicated. But in addition, there are antifungals, antibiotics in there. There are other things in there that even trace of heavy metals that are used as adjuvants in addition to aluminum. And these all they're synthetic, and you know that heavy metals, when they go into a body, can create all kinds of problems. We're injecting that into our animals, into the matrix, which is the between the skin and the muscle, or even into the muscle sometimes. And that stays in there. And we know how, for most of you people out there, how difficult heavy metal detoxification can be. So when we do repeated vaccines, now I mean every year you get the little reminder card that says Fifi's due for this, this, and this. You can't even make out the letters of the alphabet. You just blindly go ahead and have Fifi vaccinated for everything under the sun. To me, that's wrong. Because now we're putting all these artificial substances in our animals when they may not need that at all.
So why would a vaccine not be able to have less of those ingredients or none of those ingredients? And I guess my question right now is, and I've never really even asked this before, is somebody trying to work to make them better? I feel like they've been this way a long time.
Well, Dana, what happens is these vaccine manufacturers are out to make a profit. They are not out for I know this sounds kind of strange, but they are not out for your animal's health. They are out to make money. Now, if they don't put an adjuvant in there, sometimes the component, the antigen, which is the thing that we're vaccinating for, say like the rabies antigen or the distemper antigen, is not strong enough to mount a good immune response, then they'll add the aluminum phosphate or the aluminum salts to the vaccine to make it stronger. And the other thing is, once you put a vaccine and you get a good shelf life on it, it has to have preservatives and other things in there to prevent it from going bad too soon or losing its efficacy. So I think that in the modern realm, these things are added to create more profit for the company, because longer shelf life, veterinarians can store more away, blah, blah, blah. Right. I hate to say blah, 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 but there's a lot of reasons behind it that aren't so good.
I know exactly what that means.
Okay.
So, when we talk about vaccines like that, I've heard it said that we should ask, for example, for a thimerosal-free vaccine or a mercury-free vaccine, and that is something we have to ask for, that it is not the norm. And I've had people sit across from me or on the phone and legit straight up argue with me that it doesn't exist, right? That there's no mercury in vaccines anymore. And I believe that is just not a true statement, that there is, or there is thimerosal in there. And unless we specify, we run the risk of having that included in the vaccines that our dogs get as just the norm. Is that true?
Correct. There's one particular company that makes what they call a recombinant technology type of vaccine, and they don't have to have the adjuvant in there. It's way over my head to try to spit out all the details and what this technology is, and it doesn't matter for this talk because we want to make it as simple as possible. But when you have recombinant technology, it's a little more expensive vaccine. Not all veterinarians are going to go for that. They have to charge double what they would normally charge for another vaccine. A lot of veterinarians don't know that thimerosal is even in the vaccine. Exactly. You know, they just take it for granted. Here's their vaccine. We're just going to pop it in the animal. And so that's why a lot of these veterinary clinics are not going to have that. And it's even, I know we're going to get into this, but I'm going to mention it while my brain is fresh on this topic, is not only should we think about a thimerosal-free vaccine, we should also think about doing single vaccines or just one or two rather than the 9-way or the 8-way or 9-way distemper lepto combination shot. Mm-hmm. Then we're taking all these components, putting in one spot in the animal all at one time. And then that animal is loaded with stuff. You know, we're talking about 9 or 10 different components if you add the rabies or Lyme disease, kennel cough to that. And the most serious reactions I see in animals are the ones that are getting the big doses. I mean, like the big combination shots all at one time.
Yeah, I've seen information, and when I talk to, and I seldom get people before they get a puppy. You probably get them when they get puppies, obviously. I usually get them when the dog is older and starting to show behavioral problems. But the things that I've studied over the years say we should basically not deliver vaccines simultaneously with any other vaccine, with any other stressor, surgical procedure, you know, those kinds of things, which is really common in the rescue world to go just get a blast of all things that need to take place one day. And that's pretty taxing on the body.
Right.
So when we think about that scheduling of, and let's just start with the puppies, what is a good schedule for puppy vaccines, and what do they get from their mother in terms of immunity, and how that cycle plays into the schedule? Can you kind of bring those pieces together for us?
Sure. So when a puppy is still nursing and still under the mother's antibody protection, they see when the puppy's nursed, they get the mother's antibodies. If mom obviously was vaccinated correctly before she got pregnant. Mm-hmm. The puppy, those circulating antibodies are going to start to wear off anywhere from 6 to 7 weeks of age, maybe 8 weeks. And then the puppy starts building up their own immune system, but those immune systems are not fully developed until about 14, 15, sometimes even 16 weeks of age. Mm-hmm. And we call that area between the early and the later stage the window of vulnerability. That means that if a puppy isn't vaccinated during that time, it may get sick. We just don't know how much circulating antibody from mom is still there, and we don't know how well the puppy is still building its own immune system. So this is the critical point. Now, a lot of veterinary clinics may start at 6 weeks of age and then vaccinate every 3 or 4 weeks until the puppy is 15 or 16 weeks of age. I like to go with the schedule of 9, 12, and 15 weeks for distemper, adenovirus, and parvovirus. And then at 18 to 20 weeks, then we do the rabies. Now, this is a recommendation that was endorsed by Dr. Ron Schultz from the University of Wisconsin, and he's now retired. But in fact, I'm just going to tell you a little secret. Dr. Schultz, he's professor of immunology, so he understands this stuff. He has a PhD in immunology.
Mm-hmm.
And he only vaccinates his puppies at 9, 12, 15 weeks of age for the 3 things I just mentioned, and then rabies at 18 to 22 weeks of age. He repeats that 1 year later, and then he depends on titers, which are blood tests to see how much antibody is circulating. He does that in lieu of doing vaccines every year. Right. And if he says, I've never, ever had to revaccinate my animals. Right. Now, the big problem with that is that with rabies, you can't use a titer. No state in the United States recognizes a titer as like proof of immunization. Right. You can write a medical exemption in some states, but no state will recognize a titer, which I think is just wrong. But I don't make the laws, so.
Yeah. But there are people who are leading movements to try and get that sort of thing changed, and we should all, in our state, go be part of those movements too. I know Dr. John Robb, Dr. Jean Dodds, they are heading up efforts that are, certainly pro-titer and trying to make sure that those things will start to be recognized in our areas. Mm-hmm. What do you think about a puppy that has received its rabies at around 16 weeks, as early as 4 months old?
Well, Dana, I really don't know what to think about that. I know there's a big push to not do rabies vaccines until they're older, but here's my thing, is that say you've got a coonhound and they're going to go out and they're going to be out in the woods for training or whatever, and they're being exposed to these wild animals. Mm-hmm. And if they haven't been vaccinated, let's say they start their training at 6 months and they haven't been vaccinated, then they are perhaps subject to getting rabies at that young age because mom's antibodies would have weaned off by that time. So I really don't know what the recommendations are, why they make these. Now, if you've got a pet, like a little dog that's going to pee on a potty pad and sits on grandma's lap all day, mm-hmm. There's really no reason to have that dog vaccinated that early. Right. But does that make sense?
It does.
So,
it does.
Mm-hmm.
I just think,
so I'm not sure if I answered I'm sorry. I don't know if I answered your question correctly or not, but.
I don't think there's correct. I think it's just, your educated opinion, but I just think the little body at 4 months old who is trying to find his own immune system and build up all those things, especially if we pair it with the parvo distemper vaccine or other vaccines, is too much at one time.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And go ahead.
No, continue. Because I was going to shift into a new question.
Okay, well, I was just going to say that's one thing that I try to get my clients to understand is if we can split the rabies up and we can split the other 3 vaccines up, that would be much better for the puppy, mm-hmm. and not just load that puppy full of things all at one time.
So one of the things I hear often with my rescue contacts in the South is until a puppy is fully vaccinated, that their feet should not touch the ground, right? Unless it's in their own little private backyard. So no social outings to the Home Depot, no social outings to the beach or the walk through the park or any of those kinds of things. Why is that? Or, are we over it? Are we taking that guidance too far? What are your thoughts on how to balance socialization with immunization?
Good question, because, some puppies would be fully immunized. I mean, that means that they're competent to go out and withstand a disease challenge like parvo, mm-hmm. and with one vaccine. And others who may not have a fully functioning immune system yet they might need 2 vaccines before they're fully ready to go out. But we can do things to minimize risk. For example, if we're feeding that puppy a good raw diet or homemade diet, fresh food diet, I should say, mm-hmm. We're going to have a stronger, healthier dog to begin with. We can also do things like support with herbs or essential oils to help any kind of supplements to help build that immune system. So if that puppy is exposed to something, it's not necessarily means that it's going to get ill.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it.
Okay. If we have a puppy that does contract parvo, I know that requires veterinary care. I'm not foolish enough to say you can treat that at home. But what other supportive things from the natural wellness world could a dog mama bring to the recovery process, or, you know, the recovery, for lack of a better word? What can we do should they contract that disease?
You want to be more specific?
Like,
in
are there
asking
oils
me,
that
like,
they can add? Can we add in supplementation? Should we add supplementation after they get back home? Do we need to build them back up? You know, what can we do naturally once they are not dying, so to speak?
Right. Well, I think that's a good question, because there's very little that conventional medicine can do. The main thing with parvo puppies is electrolytes and fluids, because what that parvovirus does to the intestinal villi, which is, there are little tiny projections that are up and down in the lining of the intestine, they're destroyed, they're gone. And that's why these puppies have such raging diarrhea, because they can't reabsorb water into their system. Mm-hmm. Once those microvilli start to respond and start to regenerate, then we can add supplements. But until that point, it's kind of useless, and it may be irritating to that gut. So I would suggest using essential oils in diffusing ways, you know, where we call it aromatherapy, mm-hmm. or we can use them topically to support digestion. Because essential oils, when they're applied topically, they can go into the system within, I think, 20 seconds is what I've read. They will get through the dermal layers or the skin layers. And then they can get into the bloodstream and circulate to where they need to go. It's very quick, very good absorption. And so, for example, like, I like a blend called Paragize. It's one that's pre-diluted for animals. And so if your dog gets parvo, your puppy gets parvo, you could just put a little on his belly 2 or 3 times a day and help that digestive system help, you know, get back into normal mode, I should say. And you can also use the immune supporting oils like frankincense, you know, there's one called Thieves. We kind of have to dilute that out a little bit because it's pretty strong. But there are a lot of oils that support a good immune system and help that puppy even emotionally get back. They feel like crap. Take your worst case of stomach flu and take that times 100. And that's what that puppy is feeling like. Yeah. So if we can use those oils to support the psyche as well as the physical body, then we're going to have a lot better, a lot faster healing process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So shifting gears out of the puppy world, unless you want to add something else about puppies specifically, if we think about a dog that has been over-vaccinated, which I believe is a real possibility in our shelter world, where we have dogs that land in there as a stray, or sometimes even as an owner surrender, but no documentation is available on the history. The shelters are required by law here to revaccinate for rabies, and they do the parvo distemper and everything else all in one shot. What would some symptoms of over-vaccination be? Can we diagnose it, or is it just a suspect type observation?
Well, that's $1 million question, because there really is no way we can prove. We can speculate that if the animal comes up with, well, here's a good case. I like stories, okay?
Yeah.
Here's a good example. So yesterday when I was filling in for this other clinic, I had this dog that came in, had some really bad ears. And they said that we can manage it for most of the time, but now, just like a month ago, it started to get really bad. And I looked on the medical chart. Sure enough, a month ago, it had all of its vaccines. Now, somebody could say, oh, that's just coincidence. Mm-hmm. But when you see this over and over and over again, along with things like skin breakouts, allergy, what we call allergic dermatitis. We may see an autoimmune condition. We may see digestive issues. We can see some really serious things. There's no way to tie it to the vaccine, but anybody, I got to watch it. I could get a little passionate here. Anybody with a critical thinking mind can say, oh my goodness, look what is happening. And look at just a few weeks ago, it got 8 vaccines. You know, and then, so most of our holistic veterinary community is very in tune to this possibility. Conventional veterinarians will still deny it because they haven't been trained to look for anything. They just think, oh, it's a coincidence, and they just blow it off. Besides that, vaccine companies are protected from litigation. So let's say that your dog has a really severe anaphylactic reaction, meaning it swells up, maybe passes out, maybe even goes into cardiac arrest after vaccine, right after a vaccine. Because you can't prove it, the companies can't be held liable for it.
Right.
And they're not required to report a vaccine reaction. Most veterinarian clinics won't even pay any attention to it. They'll just say, well, maybe some of the better ones will say, well, we better never ever vaccinate your dog again, or we're going to have the emergency things set up here so that if you have to have a vaccine, say like you're in a state where rabies is required no matter what, but there are other things that we can do to mitigate that, and a lot of conventional veterinarians don't know that.
Right.
So that's the bad thing.
So will you describe for us some potential vaccine reactions? I know a lot of people don't necessarily think of swelling at the injection site, or, you know, soreness or lethargy, you know, sort of that fatigued look after receiving vaccines as a reaction to be concerned about. They've been led to believe from traditional veterinarians that that is a normal reaction and to not worry about it. In my opinion, I think if you've seen that, you should very much worry about the next time.
Absolutely, Dana. And so that I break it into 3 categories. You can have mild, moderate, and severe reactions. So the mild one would be maybe the next day your dog comes out and kind of sniffs at the food bowl, eats a few kibbles of food or a few bites of food and walks away. Or it's a little tender when you touch it, maybe it flinches a little bit where the injection site was. That's a mild reaction. Maybe they're sleeping a little bit more at that point. Moderate would be more severe lethargy where it doesn't want to get up and move at all. You touch your dog and it just whines or, you know, acts like it's just, you go to pick up a small dog and they're like screaming. Their body sore all over. We call it hyperesthesia. And then we have, you know, the dogs that run a slight fever, even a moderate fever, and they end up having to go back into the clinic for a steroid shot or some Benadryl or something like that. The severe one, the life-threatening reaction, is called anaphylactic shock. That usually happens right after a vaccine, or you drive your 15-minute drive home and you notice your dog's having trouble breathing, face is swelling up, eyes are shutting down, and maybe there's some respiratory distress as well. And then the worst case scenario is where your dog would collapse, maybe go into grand mal seizure, go into cardiac arrest, and die. So there are all those variations of vaccine reactions. And then we have the one that's even more concerning, which is what we call a vaccinosis reaction or vaccinosis. And this can happen days, weeks, months, or even years after a vaccine, where the dog develops an autoimmune condition, you know, chronic inflammatory bowel disease, terrible skin allergies, ear infections, and even cancer. And this is the toughest one to diagnose because it doesn't happen right away.
Right.
So, yeah. And it's very hard to prove. But again, if you can look at the patterns, if, you know, as a veterinarian, I keep records of all this. I look at the patterns and I go, oh, this dog was perfectly healthy until it got all of those vaccines all on one day. And now we have a dog with, oh, here's a specific one. They call it idiopathic meningoencephalitis. That means it has meningitis, but there's no known cause for it. And I did have a client. This is a really interesting case. And I wrote about it in one of my books. This young couple had a dog. It was a beagle, and it was 11 years old, never had an issue, just happy, healthy 11-year-old beagle. Went in, had all of his vaccines. I didn't know this at the time when I looked at it, but they had just been to the University of Wisconsin, spent $3,000, I think probably like close to $3,500 on this dog because it started to develop these muscle tremors in its neck, just kind of just like this. And then it went to full body tremors, and then it went to the point where the dog couldn't stand without assistance. So they took it to the regular veterinarian, and they did a course of steroids. It wasn't responsive to the steroids. So then they referred to the University of Wisconsin. They did all this imaging, the MRI, CAT scan, didn't find anything except a tiny bit of fluid at the base of the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is the part of the brain that regulates coordination and movement. And so they didn't know why it had this. And so I was questioning them, what's Max eating? They were doing a fresh food diet with him. What's he getting for supplements, blah, blah. Very, very well taken care of dog in that respect. But I said, something just kind of clicked. The little light bulb goes like, when did Max have his vaccines last? Well, so I saw Max November 22nd of 2015. On November 7th of that year, he'd had the full shebang. He had rabies, Lyme, distemper, parvo, adenovirus, parainfluenza, and then the kennel cough and the canine influenza all in the same day.
Man.
All in the back of the neck. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for me. But do you think anybody else would even correlate that?
Right.
No. And we did a lot of homeopathic things, or I should say homotoxicology agents, essential oils, supplements. And Max improved a little bit, but a year later, he crashed again, and they ended up having to euthanize him. It was a really sad case.
Right.
But in my mind, I was totally convinced that the vaccines did that.
Yeah. I don't know as much as you, but that's what I would believe as well. And I see a lot of behavioral cases that I believe are related to that. I've seen what I would consider one case of what I think some people call rabies rage that follows vaccines. It was the worst case of aggression I have ever seen. And it was like within days of receiving a rabies vaccine. So you can't tell me that's not what it was. And there was nothing to be done for this animal.
Oh,
He
that's
was
really
the
sad.
worst
They call
case of aggression I have ever seen, even to his own people.
Wow, that is really sad. That's what we call a rabies miasm. And that is in simple terms where a dog is showing symptoms of having rabies, but if you test them, they don't have rabies.
Right.
It is it's a reaction from the vaccine that centers in the brain. And sometimes it lasts for days, sometimes it lasts for weeks, sometimes years. And then, like you said, if it was a terrible case like that, there's no treatment for it.
Right. So for some of the cases that are milder, let me back up to the dog going in to get vaccines. Are there things that we can do with essential oils, natural remedies at the time of vaccination at the injection site? I know nutrition is a big deal, but I also believe we should be putting little essential oils on there. I am a believer in the homeopathic remedies as well, and would just like your opinions on adding those as part of a follow-up aftercare program for dogs receiving vaccines.
Well, Dana, that's very, very true. We should be doing something. And I know that in your protocol that you had sent me, that you recommend starting early, like before the vaccine. And I'm like, that's perfect, because anything we can do to mitigate a reaction or any kind of adverse reaction is perfect. But bare minimum, say like if you don't want to do much or you don't believe that this is going to be an issue with your dog, minimum, take an essential oil like lemon, or the one I like the best is the Young Living Purification, because the name says it all. And I just instruct my owners to take their, bring their oil with them. Once we get the vaccine injected, then we'll just put a little drop of maybe both of those oils right over the injection site. It doesn't have to be the exact area, but at least, and that's immediate. So immediately we'll, like I said, mitigate the chances of any kind of adverse reactions happening. And then when you get home, you can do the same thing again. Oftentimes I'll have my owners do a raindrop therapy. And I know that do you teach your clients to raindrop?
Absolutely.
Okay. Raindrop is excellent. And a lot of people are reluctant because they'll say, I don't want to screw up the vaccine. I don't want to, make I want the vaccine to work. And I'm saying, right. Well, you know what? No problem, because the vaccine is going to work. All we're doing is we're reducing the chances of those artificial ingredients, those excipients I talked about earlier, getting in there and causing an issue. Yeah, and that's what the oils will do.
We can't get the vaccine out, but we might have a chance at making sure all that other stuff is not causing chaos. True statement.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so that's at the time of vaccination. If at some point later there's a theory from a veterinarian like yourself or me as a trainer looking in on this with what I do know about all of this, what can be done? Can I mean, certainly I know I could have my client call you and say, this is the theory, can you help us? What's possible? I know it may not be guaranteed to work and it might not do anything depending on severity, but what are some options?
Well, I saw this in your protocol, and I was going to mention this too, was, using the homeopathic remedy. When your dog is vaccinated for rabies, use Lyssin, Lyssin. And you can buy this in no-sods, the little pellets that you give your dog. And that will help mitigate any issues with the rabies vaccine. And hopefully, if the dog is prone to the rabies miasm, this will take care of the problem. Also, for other vaccines, there's a homeopathic remedy called Thuja.
Right.
Thuja, for those of you, the J is silent. And basically, I like to give this for 2 or 3 weeks after. Yes. Now, Thuja can either be in the pellets, or there is a company called Heal. It's hard to find this stuff anymore, but because this is a homotoxicology product, which homotoxicology, I'm just going to say we're going to put in the same category as homeopathic. And those come in tablets. So you can use the tablets daily, or you can use the no-sods like what you have in your protocol, Dana. Anything we can do, even supplement-wise to balance out the immune system. And I know that you in your protocol had, what was I going to say? Do you have that I'm sorry, I'm not saying it right.
Dog food?
Yeah, don't they have a supplement that you can add to the food and it's supposed to help with the immune system balance?
They certainly have a vitamin mineral supplement that is excellent for dogs. And we tend to recommend that for the kibble feeders or the home prepared food that might not be optimal. You would not need that if they were feeding the diet itself, but the product is called Endurance, and it's excellent for those that are still feeding a kibble or a potentially out of sync home prepared option.
Gosh, good to know.
Well, then I did get milk thistle sometimes, right? I add milk thistle at the time of vaccine to just help give the liver a little extra love as it manages all that went in.
Right, and also Young Living has a really good product called Detoxime, and it has 11 different enzymes in it. And we all need enzymes for all body processes, but it's especially important for the gut. And if you think about the gut being the major organ of immune support, immune function, that's where we need to start. It also has cumin, anise, fennel. So it has the essential oils to back that up too. So other things like, I know that you had put inner defense in your protocol, and that is a really good product in the multi-greens for detoxing. That's an excellent idea.
Well, and just
I would
about
say,
making sure the immune system, right? Because
Mhm.
here's a question for you. It's my understanding, for example, that immediately following a vaccine, the immune system is actually weakened. So in order to go in as strong as we can and to help it build itself back up after receiving vaccines, that's why those products like the immune boosting supplements seem to make sense, or the greens to add additional green veggie supplement into the diet for immune boosting efforts.
Right. So the thought is that for about 7 to 10 days, maybe even 14 days after vaccination, the body goes into immunosuppression because the immune system is just like working overtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that 2 weeks, it goes into hyper mode and it's going crazy. This is where we start to see the beginning of autoimmune diseases,
Right.
whether it's an autoimmune bleeding disorder or other tissue degeneration where the immune system is attacking its own body in different places or whatnot. So going back to inner defense and thieves, inner defense is a capsule and it has a lot of very strong oils in it. So I would suggest opening up the capsule of inner defense and squirting it on topically with the little, it's already diluted in coconut oil, but I tell you what, I love the whole concept of inner defense. Personally, I can't take it because I have a sensitive stomach. So if we have a dog with a sensitive stomach, we go topical, or we, use just a little bit squirted on their food.
Yeah, that's what I do is I pierce the like I'm looking at my little dachshund. He's 17 years old. Now, granted, he has not had a vaccine in a long time, nor will he ever again.
Good for you.
But when he gets inner defense, I pierce the bottom and just put a couple of drops in his food, and then I put the gel cap in a little zippy and save it for the next feeding.
Perfect.
But we've not had a problem with them taking that directly with their food because their food is moist, wet, red meat with fat in it, and they're happy to it's like seasoning, so
right.
You're okay with it.
Right. Good. So, and then, I just, go ahead with your next question because I could come up with a lot of different things.
Oh, so could I. So we've kind of been talking a little bit about what people may term as a detox after vaccination. And I just want to clarify what that really means. I want you to clarify for us, if you would. Again, we're not getting the vaccine out. Is in there, is going to be in there. And earlier on, you mentioned like doing the heavy metal detox and that sort of thing. What is that, and how do we do it, and what can we expect as a potential outcome of taking a detox approach, if anything?
Well, heavy metals are very difficult to get completely out of the system, and it takes a long time. So I use supplements, like you mentioned, to support the liver, like your milk thistle. Young Living makes Juvatone, Juvaflex over the liver area, even helichrysum. And I think you mentioned Ledum in your protocol too, which is excellent for liver health. So, anything you can do to help that liver, because the liver is the big detoxifier. And if we need to support that big time. And even simple things like making sure your dog has enough fresh water that is not chlorinated or fluoridated. If you are living in a municipality where they use those two things, make sure you're using purified water from the store or bottled water. Anything, even well water on a farm is better. because chlorine and fluoride, well, chlorine is an endocrine disruptor, meaning that it's going to affect the thyroid and other hormones in the body. Fluoride affects the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go into a whole workshop on fluoride, but oftentimes it's even smell, I can smell chlorine in city water and I won't drink it. I just think it's awful. But then I think of these poor dogs that have 100 to 200 times the sense of smell that we have, and then they're smelling that.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably not going to be drinking as much water, and we have to have the water to flush.
Right.
So
right.
a few extra things you can do there.
When I moved,
I'm not sure if I answered.
When I moved down here to the beach, I zydoed my dogs a few months after being here, and all 3 of them started showing up with heavy metals. And I'm like, what the heck is this coming from? Mm-hmm. And it's the water. And now, so I bought a Berkey. I know some people are into the zero water or other whole house systems and all that kind of stuff. If you need an affiliate link for Berkey, I'll hook you up. But we've been drinking purified water. And I can tell the difference now. And this is just over time. It's like walking into a place that's cleaned with bleach, how that affects my head now. If I drink water that has not been purified, I can tell, just like you're describing, you can smell the difference, you can taste the difference, that there is something in that water that we shouldn't be having.
Right, exactly. So everything plays a factor. You can, there's a lot of different products, but for detoxification, but I always think of detoxification in the gut first, because that's where we have your dogs can develop leaky gut syndrome just like we can, from toxins and bacteria, viruses, funguses, other toxins that hit the gut. So enzymes are very important. Probiotics are very important. Anything that, like I said, that supports the liver, and there's a gazillion different oils and supplements that can help with that. Mm-hmm. And I want to tell your audience that, because you know this, Dana, but Young Living is the only oil company that I trust for animals and people and kids. I mean, period. If you can't, Young Living, you can pretty much take all of everything that they have and eat it, and it's not going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you can't put it in your mouth, don't put it on your skin, because your skin absorbs everything. So right. A lot of these essential oil companies out there have things, that products and oils that are not pure 100% genuine oils. They have adulterants, chemicals, extenders, and whatnot in there. And that's what makes our pets sick. That's what makes us sick when we try these things. So even in, breathing them in, I smelled an artificial rose oil before. It's called rose. I don't even remember what the name of it is. It made me immediately wheeze and get a headache.
I agree.
And then the real rose oil I smelled before, and it's just intoxicating.
It smells like the flower.
Right.
It smells like a real rose.
And you cannot fudge on quality. So guys, you who are on the fence about essential oils, I want you to contact Dana, because Dana is a distributor. She can help you set up your own account, get your own products. I also have courses on my website, barbfoxdvm.com, that you can buy for a minimal fee. You have lifetime access to the course, and you can learn safe and effective ways of using the oils in your animals. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yep. Awesome. So I don't know that I have other questions. Oh, I do have another question. 2 things. Okay. And I'm just going to back up to, we hit on this earlier, that we should not we should not give vaccines at the same time as other vaccines, other surgical procedures, other, hit the body. We also hear that we shouldn't do that when the dog is unwell. What does that mean? What is the definition of an unwell pet that probably should not ever have another vaccine?
Okay, so my first thought, Dana, is an elderly, debilitated dog should not have vaccines. If we have a dog with cancer, it should not have a vaccination. I can even go further with any allergic skin disease, any autoimmune condition like lupus, even diabetes, cardiovascular issues, anything that's chronic. And it's interesting, if you, like I said, the insert that comes in the box of vaccines that you get, if veterinarians would read that, it says for immunization of healthy animals only. It does not say if your dog is ill, go ahead and vaccinate it. So, you know, I have refused to vaccinate. It's like, and in my holistic practice, I only vaccinate for what somebody needs by law. So if they need a rabies shot to transport their animal, but when I fill in at this other clinic, oftentimes, you know, I have to have the talk with the owner, like, Fifi, look at this irritated skin, or she's running 102 fever. If I vaccinate her today, I'm going to make her sicker. So we need to wait a month until she's all healed. Some people get angry with me because they paid for an office call to come in and get a vaccine, but their animal is sick. And I'm looking out for the animal.
Right.
So that doesn't happen very often, thank goodness. And I don't want to pick on clients like that, but I think that most clients have to realize that vaccines are a medical procedure. They're not just something that you give. And please, if you open up a can of worms here. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, you know, it's like these grocery stores or the farm stores. I mean, she'd say grocery stores were people, but, or the drug stores.
Mm-hmm.
They have the whole block long of little banners outside, get your free flu shot, or get your flu shot today.
Yes.
Or you go down to the feed store, they have a Saturday morning vaccination clinic where maybe a technician is administering vaccines. That's wrong, because who's going to bring your animal out of a serious reaction if it goes in and has an anaphylactic reaction? Or they're not looking at your medical records. I even saw in Colorado somewhere where for people, they had a drive-through vaccine clinic. So you just roll down your window, shove your arm out, and they pop you and you go. Hello, this is a medical procedure. So I just kind of went on a little bandwagon there, but make sure that if you are vaccinating your animals, that you discuss that, and you make sure your veterinarian discusses your animal's health, the risks involved, as far as if you have an indoor kitty that never goes outside, why would you vaccinate it for feline leukemia? I know this is a dog show, but I'm just giving an example. If you have a dog that pees on a potty pad, and like I said, sits on somebody's lap or never goes outside, or very few times it goes outside, why does it need a Lyme vaccine? Why does it need a kennel cough vaccine? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the kennel cough vaccine, Dana. Across the board, the efficacy is only about 50%.
Right.
So, you know, and sometimes it's even less than that. Kennel cough is a really weird disease because it has several different like viruses and bacteria that can cause kennel cough. Right. And so it's really impossible to vaccinate for something that has multiple components. So I wish that we,
and maybe it's treatable, right? The kennel cough is treatable. And
very rarely do we I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine, continue.
Very rarely is a dog going to die of kennel cough. I mean, if you've got an old debilitated dog with respiratory issues or heart issues, it could be serious, but at the same time, the vaccine can not work. And this happened to a really good friend of mine. She was actually a director of the Humane Society in one of our towns here in Iowa. She and I have been friends for 50 years. I mean, that's how long we've known each other. And she's very conventional minded. So we kind of go round and round between natural medicine and conventional with her. But she was leaving for a 2-week vacation, and the Humane Society had just built a community, what they called the Mutt Hut, just a state-of-the-art boarding facility. So she went into her conventional veterinarian and had the canine influenza shot, and which I'd had before, and then boosted the kennel cough for both her little dogs. And when they came back, they were deathly ill. They had some kind of respiratory pathogen going on around that Mutt Hut. Well, so the one dog had 104 temperature. One dog had actually liver enzymes that were elevated. We didn't know if it was from the shot or if it was from the disease or what. But she had the aha moment. It's like, oh, I guess these vaccines aren't 100% effective, are they? I'm like, no, they're not. So just another thing.
And they're not immediate either, right? So if you get the kennel cough vaccine, because you're going into a boarding facility, for example, you have to do that a certain number of weeks in advance. And while that, I don't know the right term for it, but during that period, they're actually shedding off the vaccine and could be more contagious then than later. Correct?
Right.
So
yep. And
go ahead.
No, I mean, you have your shedders, and that's another consideration with vaccines. It's like, you can, what am I trying to say? To make this really simple, it's actually sometimes better to expose your we're going to go back to puppies here for a second. Sometimes better to expose your puppies to other puppies and get the natural infection and let them build up an immunity, which lasts for life. Vaccines immunity only lasts for, it can last a long time, but usually not a lifetime.
Right.
Okay.
I know when I had a kennel building for training, and we would have anywhere from 10 to 15 dogs at any given time. And back in the day, before I was doing a lot of this natural stuff, I required the Bordetella vaccine like most doggy daycares still do. And I get why they do it. I understand. It's because if you have an outbreak of something in your facility, you're responsible, right? You, as the owner of that facility, are responsible for the medical care of all those animals. Well, in walks this dog, slinging green snot everywhere. It took a couple of days for it to happen, but here comes all the green snot. I'm like, oh my God. And he had been in a doggy daycare while they were on vacation prior to coming to me. And I thought, oh, we're going to have a big outbreak. And I started diffusing essential oils in the kennel building, sort of rotating which one I was using around the clock. They were all getting essential oils in their food, or a gel cap if they would swallow it, slathered in coconut oil with owner permission. They all knew that this is what I was doing. So it's not like I'm sneaking behind doing my voodoo stuff. But we managed that, and no dogs got sick, and the one dog recovered quickly and everybody was happy. But, certainly the doggy daycares still require it. The veterinarians do if you're going to have your dog overnighted in a facility following a medical procedure. And I just looked recently to send Poppy to doggy daycare just for a few hours a day so she would have a play friend, and they're going to require all these vaccines. And I said, sorry, girl, you can't go. It's just not going to happen. So.
Yeah, that's really disturbing though, Dana, because you're taking the risk of your dog getting sick. Your healthy dog is not going to come in and contaminate all the dogs that have already been vaccinated. So why would they care? And
I don't know.
Going back to rescues, you'd asked me about, what would we do to prevent a dog that doesn't have a vaccine history, or they can't find the records for this animal and they just go ahead and vaccinate it again. Here's the really tough part. So these rescues are on a budget.
Sure.
And they could do titers on these dogs when they come in and see if they've been vaccinated, if they have circulating antibodies that are adequate. They wouldn't need vaccines, but I don't think that most of the rescues have that kind of time or money, or would want to spend that kind of time or money, and they just go ahead and vaccinate again. So it's not in the best interest of the animal, or I should say the dog that comes in to the rescue. I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I do know, like you mentioned with the doggy daycare, that to do these essential oils, to be diffusing, to be petting them with them. Oh my goodness, there's so many good qualities with these essential oils. And I guess it's just educating people and trying to get their mindsets, get them to step out of the box and look at something different.
Yeah. Essential oils in my kennel building was the beginning of a massive change in my thinking and how I did things, and what I've learned over the last number of years. It started because I wanted to keep all the dogs calm in the kennel building overnight or when they first arrived, and they'd be freaked out about being somewhere new. And it led down this path of fighting off things like kennel cough and, respiratory illness. Dog came in and a couple days later, I'm like, oh, I think she's got the beginning of a UTI. Now, can I diagnose that? I can't diagnose squat, but I have seen it a million times in the foster world. And I'm like, my best suspicion is that's what it is. So I'm going to give it a day or so of trying what I know would resolve that. And with the first essential oil application, I saw immediate improvement. I mean, of course, I would have taken her to the veterinarian if we didn't see improvement. But my friends in the rescue space who've been doing this for a number of years, you know exactly what you're looking at, right? A UTI, people can identify straight away, go, yep, seen that before. Or
Right.
a dog that has tweaked his leg and you're thinking, I'm not sure if it's a sprain or whatever. I just had a client call me this week and she said, I was out walking my dog. She tweaked her leg. I don't think we need the vet. So she and I talked about arnica homeopathy, which she happened to have on hand. I said, if you need me to bring in some essential oils, I'm on my way. She said, no, let's try the arnica first. And we got those resolved. So my point is there's a lot of first aid things that we can do when we're comfortable enough to sort of wait and see for those non-emergency moments and then see where we need to head after that. And essential oils are, in my opinion, they're my first reach these days. It is the first thing I reach for no matter what's going on. Even if it happened to be riding in the car on the way to the vet, they're getting anointed as we go.
Right. Well, when I had my physical office open, now I closed my physical office a few years ago so I could do consultations for people and reach more people. I'm in a little tiny rural town in Iowa here, and it's very not holistic minded. So I do have a lot of people searching for holistic veterinarians across the country. And so this is one of the things that I do is I do telemedicine now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, I just kind of lost the train of thought. We were talking about, using essential oils. So when I had my physical office open, I basically focused on aromatherapy and what we call medical aromatherapy or medical essential oils and nutrition. You can fix a heck of a lot of things with nutrition and essential oils.
Sure.
And how essential oils work so well is because they work on the mind, the spirit, and the body. A pill that you shove down your dog is not going to work on the mind. I mean, for the most part, if we're looking at just like vitamin B, it's not going to take care of the emotions and the mental wellness for your dog. But essential oils, when they're smelled or when they're absorbed topically, they go right to the thought process, the emotional processing part of the brain. And that's where they shine. Because we know that all disease starts usually with something that happened emotionally or mentally.
Right. So last question that I have is, what would you say to those pet parents twofold question, who are still vaccinating and say very often, we've never had a problem with it before? And then what would you say to those pet parents who are trying to shift into more natural wellness and starting to stand up to their vet and say, no, I do not want the lepto vaccine. No, I do not want the Lyme vaccine or the Bordetella. And either the vet tech or the veterinarian is giving them considerable pushback.
Okay. So your first question is, I've never had a problem. How do you know you haven't had a problem? Problems, like if you have a dog that develops inflammatory bowel disease or just has a general decline in their mobility, can we say for sure that wasn't associated with vaccines? We can't. We can't. If your dog develops a seizure disorder, can we say it wasn't caused by a vaccine? My dog never had a problem before. It just came out of nowhere. I don't believe that. That's just my personal opinion from my personal experience. So what was the second part of your question then?
The second part is how to talk to a veterinarian who is giving
Okay.
pressure to vaccinate when they don't want to.
Well, first of all, if you're getting a lot of pushback, I would say find another veterinarian. If you feel strongly that your animal should not be vaccinated or that you do not want to choose that vaccine for your animal, then you either have to be strong enough to say no and risk that they're going to fire you as a client.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any veterinary clinics that have ever fired a client for not doing a vaccine, but you as a client, a dog owner would feel very intimidated and uncomfortable by having that kind of pressure put on you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying find a veterinarian that's a little more compassionate, that understands, like if your dog is not going outside, why should I have a Lyme vaccine? And I'm going to talk about that for just a few seconds, Dana.
Please.
Lyme vaccines. I'm in Lyme country. I'm in Northeast Iowa. We have hills, we have streams, we have forests. It's not the flat corn and bean ground that you think we have up here. We have a lot of ticks. We see a lot of Lyme disease. But I don't encourage a Lyme vaccine because we see ehrlichiosis, anaplasmosis, babesiosis, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and other tick diseases up here. So why just vaccinate for one?
Mm-hmm.
There's up to 75 different strains of Lyme disease. And so if your vaccine is only covering 5 or 6, chances are it's not going to be that effective. So, these are things that a lot of people don't think about, veterinarians don't think about when they're picking up a protocol. But I would say make sure that you have a customized program based on your animal's health, its age, its size, its risk or its exposure to the different diseases, and then customize the protocol. Don't just buy into the one size fits all. Okay?
Right. That led me to want to ask you 2 more questions. Short. At least I hope they're short.
Right.
If we don't vaccinate for Lyme and the dog winds up with one of those tick-borne illnesses, are they treatable?
Lyme disease is very tough, but I've seen so many dogs that have been vaccinated for Lyme still get Lyme disease.
Okay.
And this happens a lot up here. There are probably some vaccines that may be a little more effective, like the Muriel Lyme vaccine, because it's got a component, it focuses on just one component of the cell membrane of the Borrelia organism. And it's way beyond my my scope of technology to explain it here in this little talk. But they are very difficult. And now they're finding out with even humans that have very little tick exposures, they're still getting exposed to Lyme disease. So, and coming down with Lyme disease. I have Lyme in my body. I've got 2 strains of Lyme disease in my body. And fortunately, with all the things I do naturally, it only flares up occasionally and I can live with it. But Lyme is just one of those things. But again, like I work with a lot of people in Minnesota. I have a big consulting group up there. And a lot of their horses and their dogs are getting co-infected with 3 or 4 different tick diseases at one time.
Wow.
So again, why would you vaccinate just for Lyme when they're exposed to these other things that they can get and there's no vaccine for them?
Mm.
That's just my thought.
No, understood. And the same question for lepto. It's my understanding that leptospirosis, most dogs, unless they're in pond water, puddled water that has been urinated in by some wild animal, correct me if I'm wrong, they are at very low risk. But even if exposed, if caught early enough, that disease is treatable.
It is treatable if it's caught before it causes kidney damage. But here's the problem with lepto, Dana. There are 12 major strains, and I know there are more than that, but 12 major strains of lepto. The vaccine only covers 4.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're vaccinating for lepto, it doesn't guarantee that your dog is not going to get lepto. Besides, this is a Bactrin type of vaccine, and they're manufactured differently than the viral vaccine. So Most of the time, it needs to be boosted every 6 months for the efficacy to stay where it should be.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, and this comes straight from the mouth of Dr. Ron Schultz, the past professor of the immunology I talked about earlier in this talk,
Mm-hmm.
says that lepto vaccines are the most allergenic, meaning that they will cause the most reactions.
Wow.
And so if you've got the vaccine reactor, lepto is one thing you probably would not want to put in your dog's body. Now, in clinical practice, I've only seen lepto 2 or 3 times where it's been confirmed. Like, we'll send in the urine, we'll send in blood titers and check that, and sure enough, they have. But here again, if we've got the indoor dog that doesn't go out very often, it doesn't need lepto. Even these, I know countless farm dogs that go out and drink out of ponds and they're not vaccinated, and they live to 15.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's just one of those things. You've got to keep your dog's immune system up. And if we have too sterile of an environment where they're not getting exposed to anything, then they're more prone to it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like kids that go out and play in dirt have a better immune system than kids that are, you know, exposed to hand sanitizers and
Right.
mom cleans everything, you know, like kind of crazy. But you have to have exposure to some of these diseases to actually have a really good immune response.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you. If there's more you'd like to add,
You're welcome.
But feel free. But this is one of my favorite topics next to nutrition, which I'm highly passionate about as well. And I know a lot of times I think, and I'll just say this to the audience, I don't mean to sound preachy, or as you call it, Dr. Barb, passionate, though I am wildly passionate about this, but only with the best of intentions. I want us to do the right things for our dogs wherever we can. And I think it's so important that we get this education out and that people really start to think about the decisions that they're making and why. And hopefully making some changes in their own schedules or protocols or whatever, even to change your veterinarian, to get someone who will help you down this path. And if you need support, please call Dr. Barb and let her walk you through some of the diagnostic issues or things that you might have to help heal your pet if we really do believe there's a vaccinosis case at play. Any other?
Yes, and I just say one more thing, Dana. Vaccine injured pets, especially dogs, is a real thing. It's not a fabrication. This happens, and I don't care what your veterinarian tells you. If you feel like you've had a vaccine injured dog, try to get the information even off the internet. Call your veterinarian, and if they don't want to report it, get the if you can get the information from your vaccine or from your veterinarian as to the lot number, the type of vaccine that was used, and then do your own reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, thank you again. I really do appreciate your time and your expertise and your willingness to share it with all of us. So
thank you, Dana.
Go to Dr. Barb's website, barbfoxdvm.com.
Perfect. Thank you again, and have a good weekend.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you. You too. I'm stopping
All
there.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye.